Good afternoon to everybody. We would like to thank Colin and Maureen Frankel for sponsoring the Dvar Torah. It's Le'ilu Lishmat, the parents of Colin, his father Aaron Ben Dov and his mother Miriam Bat Hirsch, and they should have an Aliyah Began Eden in the schut of the sponsorship of the Divrei Torah amongst other schuyot, other merits. Parshat Naso, we have the mitzvah which describes a sotah. A sotah is a woman who was warned in the presence of Adim, in the presence of witnesses by her husband, that he suspects her of adultery with a certain man. And so the husband says that, you know what, he says in front of witnesses that he's asking his wife not to be alone and secluded with a man under suspicion. So, for example, there's his wife as a secretary, and she works for someone. So she's not allowed to be with that man, with, let's say, like her boss, alone. Once the husband has warned her in front of two people that he suspects her of adultery. Then the Torah tells us, but if now, even after that warning, that's what happened, once the boss and the woman went to a hotel, and she claimed, well, I just went to the hotel with him because we had to finish off some notes, etc., concerning a business deal. So we don't believe her, and she can only exonerate herself if she drinks from certain waters. And these miraculous waters, they like tested. If she was innocent, then nothing would happen to her. In fact, that her skin would be better, etc. She'd be blessed. And if, on the other hand, she was found guilty, so then what would happen was that she died. Now, so this whole matter is so like miraculous, and the Ramban ports, he accentuates this point, and he says that that in the entire Torah there's nothing that is decided from a legal point of view through miracles. Everything is decided through a system of law. We decide things on the basis of witnesses, testimony, etc. But never do we have like a miracle coming to decide a matter of law whether someone is guilty or innocent, excepting in this area. And the Ramban explains that the reason is because the Torah didn't want people to be hired detectives, etc., to see whether a spouse is faithful or unfaithful. And the Torah, on the other hand, wanted to maintain the purity of the Jewish people, the purity of the camp, that there shouldn't be mamzerim. And so how are we going to now keep such a thing? I mean, if you don't want to interfere in a person's privacy, these things, what happened between man and woman, sexual relations point of view, is something that is private. It's meant to be private. So how are we going to now know what's really going on, and that there's no mamzerim? So Hashem says, you know what? You do your part, and there doesn't have to be any intrusion in privacy. And what I'll do is I'll help the Jewish people keep and maintain their level of purity by bringing this miracle that if a woman is guilty, then she'll die, and if not, then she won't die. That's what the Ramban. That's how the Ramban explains. So now the Gemara in Masechet Sotah says that this whole institution, even when the temple was in existence, when it was still built, at a certain time, that this institution was like abolished by the sages. And the reason that it was abolished was because the Jewish people were so promiscuous. So what was the point in having this miracle? I mean, let's say the husband was promiscuous. So if he was promiscuous, he couldn't bring his wife to be tested by the waters, because the waters only worked when the husband was okay. If the husband wasn't okay, so then he couldn't expect a miracle even to determine whether his wife was also committed adultery, didn't commit adultery. It didn't work because he himself was guilty. Another way to put this is very simply, is how the Gemara and others say that Hashem's not going to make a miracle for people who are not deserving a miracle, but it's more than that. It's not that just that they're not deserving. Hashem's not going to bring a miracle to a person who doesn't appreciate a miracle. So if the people, here was a miracle in order to maintain the purity of Am Yisrael, and that I forgot to mention that's why it appears, this mitzvah appears in the Parsha of Naso, because Parsha Naso speaks about the purity of the Jewish camp before they are going to now advance to go into Eretz Yisrael. So the camp itself has to be pure. So that's why this detail is mentioned in Parshat Naso. But to get back to the point is that why was this abolished? Because there was no point in having a miracle with people who don't appreciate a miracle. And I'd like to take this one step further and to bring a fascinating example concerning Klal Yisrael, which is mentioned in the book of Judges. Everyone knows that there was a time during the reign or during the leadership of Gideon. Gideon was one of the judges, and during his time, the Jewish people were oppressed tremendously by the Midianites and between the Amalekites. There would be constant raids from Midian and from Amalek that basically brought a tremendous amount of poverty to the Jewish people. And they cried out to Hashem, and Hashem sends Gideon in order to save the Jewish people. Now listen to what the Tanakh tells us. So the Tanakh says that the Midianites and Amalekites surrounded the Jewish people in various areas like locusts. In other words, they had a tremendous army. And who's going to fight them? The Jewish people were didn't have numbers at all. But they mustered, not to say 30,000 people, 32,000 people, a little more, in order to fight Midian and Amalek. So Hashem says to Gideon, you know what, this is unbelievable. Hashem says to Gideon, there's too many people who have been recruited to the army. Wow. Have you ever heard such a thing? There's too many people that have been recruited. Every single soldier which is now volunteering to fight, it's like this pikuach nefesh, should be welcomed with open arms. So Hashem says there's too many people. So they make a ploy that, you know what, Gideon says, you know what, if a person's a little bit scared, he's a little bit timid, you know what, he can go home. There's no problem. We exempt him from the army. There's no problem. So the Tanakh, this is not Midrashim, the Tanakh says that some 20,000 people left. Okay, they're down now to 10,000 and a bit. So Hashem says to Gideon, you know what? There's 10,000 soldiers. It's too much. So in the end, Hashem said, you know what? There was a test, and what happened was that 300 were left who passed this test. The test was that they told the soldiers, you know what, go and drink by a brook. And those who kneeled in a certain way, it showed that they were used to kneeling to idols. So therefore Hashem said, you know what, those people should now be exempt. And only 300 soldiers were left. The Tanakh says, why did Hashem do this? Why you're taking 30,000 people, you're exempting them from the draft, and you're saying only 300 people can now go to the army and fight this war in which the Jewish people are totally surrounded by thousands upon thousands of soldiers from Midian and Amalek. And the Tanakh itself says, because Hashem said, I'm going to do a miracle, but I'm only going to do a miracle to people who appreciate the miracle. And I'm concerned, in inverted commas, said Hashem, that if I do the miracle and there are 30,000 people who are fighting, those 30,000 people who are fighting, they're going to attribute the victory to their own acumen, to their courage, to their heroism. They're not going to attribute the victory to Hashem. So I don't want it. I'm not going to deliver the Midianites into the Jewish people, in the hands of the Jewish people, if they can't acknowledge and appreciate that the miracle that I've done, that the victory has come from me, that I have done this, miracle. Here we have it over here, this important, Hashem does a miracle to people who can appreciate a miracle, to people who, when they open up their eyes, they see, you know what, this is a miracle. So Hashem, to summarize, Hashem does a miracle that is going to maintain the purity of the Jewish people, to people who appreciate purity, to people who appreciate that Hashem's making a miracle. And Hashem's going to bring victory to people who appreciate that this type of victory, that there was no way it could have been achieved if not for Hashem. For those type of people, Hashem then brings about a higher form of miracle. And that is what really is incumbent upon us, that in all the events, all the victories, that to mamish, to see the hand of Hashem and the miraculous nature of the victory. And when that is done by us, Hashem brings for us that greater miraculous victories. And Yeh Ratzon, that this will happen also in our present predicament, where we now in this cruel war with the Hamas, that all our Chatufim, all our soldiers should come back to Shalom. Shabbat Shalom to everyone.